All right, so welcome to the last of our three-part series um, on this wonderful topic. I actually have been really enjoying um, preparing for the class when I do. Hello, Stella. We're just
Hi,
getting started. Hi.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, we were just gonna get started on the prayers, and then we'll do a little motivation, and then we will have more discussion time. So we'll have time to do our back and forth, which seems to have been going really well the last couple of times. So I'm glad everybody could be here. I'm glad everyone's well enough, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the mind, and particularly emphasizing the ultimate side of um, or the ultimate mind. So let's first do our prayers to get our minds situated and sort of double dip on our efforts. So anything that we do in terms of the Dharma, we if we intend in the beginning, especially this intention, so we can have an ongoing sort of motivation while we're in the middle of our activity, but it's actually this intention at the beginning that sets us up for the best use of our efforts. Excuse me. So we'll just take a moment and settle in a little. Have our minds focused on one object, such as the breath, and maybe even more specifically tonight, focusing on the inhalation, the sensation, the very fine sensation as the air passes across the gateway to the nostrils. So maybe a little bit on the upper lip, but really, how far can you feel the movement of air? How do you feel that movement of air? That very refined sensation. And go ahead and follow that awareness through the entire inhalation. The turnaround point when you're no longer inhaling, but you're not yet exhaling. And the entire exhalation. And again, that turning around point. And then notice the awareness that you have as you're doing that. Notice the quality of focus. And then we're going to transfer our focus from the object of our breath and hold on to the object of our motivation, our intention. So we're going to just use our calmer mind now to answer the question for ourselves, why are we doing this? And then, because we're in the context of a Buddhist center and the study of Buddhism, understanding the mind, we also are going to make our motivation as vast and as profound as we possibly can. So, by understanding my mind, I will have a better capacity to develop my mind in order to benefit all sentient beings by becoming enlightened, by becoming completely omniscient, powerful, and infinitely compassionate, impartial, and capable. So the vastness comes from sentient beings that I know, whether they have been ants that have crossed my path, wasps that have stung me in my house, or scorpions that have run away from me. Fish that I've seen under the surface of the water. People that I've known. But I go beyond even those known beings to all the infinite, countless numbers of beings I've never met, never seen, never heard. That vastness, each one a sentient being. So, for their benefit, in reference to that countless number, this becomes a very powerful motivation. In order to really benefit, I need to develop my mind. In order to develop my mind, I need to understand it, including and especially including the true nature of my mind, the ultimate nature, the profound. So, the most profound understanding of how things exist in the world that you have right now. We start where we are. May all of my efforts tonight increase the vastness and profound understanding of my mind so that I can become enlightened in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right, so we're gonna allow that to be our motivation and start with the praises to Shakyamuni Buddha, who, of course, was the historical Buddha who actualized the path to enlightenment in his lifetime. So we praise the Buddha in order to inspire our own minds to follow the same direction and to bring those blessings into our study and practice. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayam. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit, I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang sogi chognam la, changchu pardu dagni kyapsuchi, dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi, drola penchir sangye druparsho. So that was a Mahayana refuge prayer, right? Because it says a Supreme Assembly, we're talking about the Bodhisattva Arya beings, not just the Arhat Arya beings that are not Bodhisattvas. That's something I think that's what Venerable George just taught us last time, last Saturday. So great, welcome everybody. We're gonna dive in. I'm gonna pull around I'm on here twice so that I can see you and share my screen at the same time, I hope. And who else has shown up? Okay, good. Okay, good. So the last couple of times we've gone through and talked a bit about the the mind in general and the conventional mind. So I just wanted to back up. And during the past week, I've kind of refined a couple of things. So I want to point those out. And for those of you that haven't been able to be here the last couple of weeks, um, this will allow you to kind of see what we've been doing. So the conventional mind, or the way that we talk about the mind conventionally, um, has three main um, three main perspectives maybe that we could talk about in terms of what conventional means. Um, the worldly, or the conventions. So when we are in the world and we have social conventions and we all agree, this is sort of that worldly, conventional understanding of convention, right? That's the dictionary, how it presents in terms of how we are looking at what's done in accordance with what's generally believed, okay? Or as ordinary beings, what we call worldly. So when I think of worldly, I think of the worldly dharmas versus the dharma that is the presentation of the Buddha. So the eight worldly dharmas. This is like the mundane, but it's in this sense, when we're talking about conventional versus ultimate truth, the two truths. Worldly is like the conventions. The relative or mutually dependent. So we've got everything existing as a dependent origination. So we've got everything that's mutually dependent on other things for its existence. We know that in terms of our food, in terms of our air, in terms of our economy, in terms of our social interactions. Every aspect of our life has something that that we're dependent on. And so when we're talking about the conventional mind, this is that mind that is functioning. It's got a mutual dependence on our body. We went through this a lot last time. How there's hardly any way you can separate the mind from the body. It's so mutually dependent in our human existence. We could go into those formless realms and then we wouldn't have a body to be mutually dependent on, but we'd have other aspects of our experience that we were mutually dependent upon. And then the most important in my mind, when I'm looking at the dichotomy, the duo of conventional and ultimate truth, is this covering, this aspect of the mind that conceals the suchness. So when we're talking about mutually dependent or relative, that gets us kind of close to the ultimate, right? Because ultimate reality, when we talk about emptiness and dependent origination as two sides of the same coin, it's like looking from one side, you see the head, looking from the other side, you see the tail. From one side of emptiness, you see the lack of inherent existence. From the other side of emptiness, you see the dependent origination. So that relative conventional nature of the mind is almost like seeing the other side of emptiness. But the covering, the conventional of the mind that covers over the ultimate nature of the mind, is sort of pointing at those two truths. So when we talk about the two truths, conventional and ultimate, concealing suchness is a new way I'm hearing that being presented, right? I don't think I've heard it emphasized quite the same way, but it's like we're thoroughly covering ultimate truth with our conventional reality. So when we're looking at just the mind, we're kind of covering over it. covering over the ultimate truth of it with the conventional truth of it. They both are existing at the same time, but it's sort of like a film or a covering or a misdirection of our understanding. Those are new emphasis. I'm saying those three things with a new emphasis. So is there anybody that wanted to respond to those three ways in looking at conventional nature, and particularly conventional nature of the mind? Eloise is good today. Not yet.
I'm good so far.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this a little bit, so it's just, I wanted to refine some of those terms. I kind of, each one had a little bit of a refinement from last time. Anybody that wasn't here, or anybody lost? Okay. So remember that the mind has to do with inner experience. So this is the inner experiences of feelings, self-conscious, sense consciousnesses, cognitions that remember previous experiences, cognitions that consider reasons. All of these inner experiences that we're having through our mind, not our body. We have feelings in our body, but the feeling of pleasantness, unpleasantness, and neutrality, that aspect of feelings, that comes through the mind. We talked a lot about physical versus mental, right? We talked a lot about that in general, that there's the tamed mind is the one that's really governing whether we're happy or not the body. The physical form is obstruction. The mind is not obstructed. So this is the conventional nature of the mind. And those words that we talked about. Now we had 3 words from Sanskrit talking about the mind. We're going to encounter 3 more. None of them are the same. So I've come across a few more. So we're just going to go through these definitions of mind that we already did. We talked about the clear and aware qualities of cognition, consciousness, or awareness. That clear luminosity or luminous clarity, being the essential nature of mind, which takes us really close to the ultimate nature of mind, and the aware side of it, which is the function. So our awareness or function, illuminating objects, cognizing the objects, apprehending the objects, having a sense consciousness going at getting into contact with an object, and through the sense faculty, apprehending the object, but having that quality of reflexive awareness. Even when we're talking about like a sense consciousness, like a eye sense consciousness, we got the eye, the actual organ, the eye. We've got the object, the phone that you're looking at, and we've got the consciousness, the awareness of that object. Even when we're talking about this kind of straightforward, direct perception coming through a sensory organ, and we start to talk about the consciousness having a reflexive awareness, I think there's so much to unpack there in many contexts. I'm trying to brush up on some of my Tibetan these days. And one of the ways I'm doing that is I'm studying some tenet system study, and the reflexive awareness, just that term, is so tied up in the context of the 4 different systems of the 4 tenet systems that I look at that word and I say, I'm not sure it's accurate or not, because I don't know which tenet system I'm coming from. I don't know which one you're interpreting it from. And I think it's just kind of flung out there, and it's not really, there's so much more depth to come from that. But when we talk about, again, each one of these things that are just, trying to label the mind, and so that we can kind of analyze and dissect what it is we're talking about. When it says having the quality of reflexive awareness, that means it's cognizing its own nature. So for instance, when we did the meditation at the beginning of this class, and I asked you just to focus on the airflow at the nostril, what did you notice about your own awareness? Were you actually aware of the awareness itself? Or were you only aware of the object? So you can go back to that now. Just find your breath, find the sensation of the air. And when you actually have that sensation, is it just the object you're aware of? Or just the mind that you're aware of? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the quality of reflexive awareness. And what this presentation in His Holiness's series on the science of Indian Buddhism is that it's cognizing its own nature, that you're not actually aware of the object. You're aware of the mind being aware of itself as it's in contact with the object that's external to it, anything that has the nature of matter. So the phone has the nature of matter, it's obstructive. If you flick your finger at it, it will tap on the screen and something will happen. It's obstructive, but the mental quality is not obstructed by anything that's material. And our minds can go wherever we place them. They can be on that sense of the breath, or they can be on the sense of the material, the phone that the eye consciousness is seeing, or they can be put on to the motivation. We could check right now, what is our state of mind? Is there any anger in it? We could shift into a mental consciousness, and we could check the object that is solely mental and has no physical basis at all. So we can shift our attention between one object and another while we're experiencing all these other objects with those other senses. We're looking at the phone, we're breathing, and we're having some emotional reaction, little as it is, small and subtle as it is. All of those things are kind of happening what we think is simultaneously, right? But what it is we're shifting our attention between them. When we're not apprehending that, one of them at a time, we can only apprehend one of those really at a time. And the others become a non-apprehending consciousness. So it's like it's coming in, but we're not putting our consciousness to that eye organ, right? Or the sense of the touch of the air, or the mental organ, the mental consciousness. Welcome, Drew. I haven't seen you for so long. It's nice to see you.
Hi, how are you? I
Hi.
just remembered you were on.
So nice for you.
I have a tooth surgery, so I'm don't have all my energy. So
Just relax. We're just going
And-
through a little bit of a review right now. Because we've done two
okay,
classes and we talked
I didn't.
about
I,
so just relax and enjoy and do whatever you need to do, sweetheart.
okay,
So
okay,
one of the things we've been talking about is how that clear nature of the mind and the awareness nature of the mind help. One of the ways to talk about it is to talk about so it's like, because it's clear and has no obstruction, it can take on the the sort of aspect of the object, and it's as if we're a mirror. It's as if our consciousness is like a clear mirror, just reflecting whatever object it is that it's put its attention on. So the consciousness gets its attention put onto the eye sense organ, and then we see the phone. The consciousness puts the attention on the touch sense organ, and then we can feel the air coming in and out of our nostrils. The consciousness puts its attention on the mental quality that we're having as a self-reflective awareness, and then we understand whether or not we are upset at the moment or not upset at the moment. But each of those is a reflecting of an object, and the consciousness takes on the qualities of that object and reflects them, and that's what we experience. So without an object, that consciousness doesn't have those aspects appearing. Without an object, nothing appears to the consciousness. Nothing appears to the consciousness. And so without an object, so they're mutually dependent, right? So this is one of those conventional natures of the mind where the object and the consciousness, the subject seeing the object, are mutually dependent. Here we are. That's kind of where we got to last time. That's about where we made it. So now we have our third class. And we kind of ended last time talking about how even when we were talking about the conventional nature of the mind, it seemed like we were starting to talk about the ultimate nature of the mind. Because that clear, luminous clarity that is the essential nature of the mind felt like we were talking about something that wasn't covering over ultimate truth. Because when we were talking about the mutual dependence of the conventional or relative nature of the mind, it was like we were talking about dependent origination. The only thing that separates the worldly, the conventional, from the ultimate is our intention to make it so, right? So we're intending to study this in order to understand the ultimate nature of the mind. So we're kind of blurring the difference between the two here. And we're coming to a pseudo empty, conventionally dependent nature of the mind. It's empty of obstruction, like space. So when we hear the word space, we think we know what we're talking about. Space, it's that thing way out there on the other side of the atmosphere, right? But the definition of space in Buddhism is kind of clarifying for me. It is the lack of obstruction, of physical obstruction, similar to mind, which is non-obstructive, right? So space is this placeholder that has no obstruction. But so is mind. But it's not a place. So it's sort of like the difference between space and mind is space is place oriented and mind is consciousness oriented. Both of them are non-obstructive. But both of them are also empty of true existence. So when we really want to go into, and we're going to skip over these levels that we already talked about and the 7 types, we'll talk about these are still conventional nature of mind, the direct perceiver, inferential cognizer, subsequent cognizer. So when we looked at this last time, we talked about how they depended on each other. So even when we're looking at the more subtle minds. Okay, so we've got the gross mind that's engaged with the sense consciousnesses that have physical objects, external objects coming at them, and sense objects are directly perceiving those objects. Sense faculties are directly perceiving those objects. Those are direct perceivers. The eye, direct perceiver. The nose, direct perceiver. They're consciousnesses that are directly perceiving objects that are external to this subject, the mind. I don't know about you, but when I was watching the breath across my nostrils earlier this evening, I noticed my mind was sometimes an inferential cognizer. I was inferring that I could feel. I couldn't actually feel the entire time because it was like the air was in the center of the nostril instead of on the edges. And I could feel a sort of a sensation, but I didn't actually feel wind moving across my nostril. I felt a tiny little tension, and I inferred that I was feeling the wind across my nostril. Does that make sense? An inferential cognizer might be relying on a direct perceiver. Last time we talked about, I see the smoke, I infer there's fire, and I get out of the way. When I lived up in Taos, that's exactly what happened. I was in San Cristobal, and my husband was cutting down the 7 trees we had to cut down to build our house. I had my 2-year-old baby running around, or I was carrying her or whatever, and I saw a tendril of smoke. And we dropped the chainsaw, put the baby in the truck, and still ran into the fire crossing the road. So we had to turn around and go all the way around. But that was a correct assumption. That was an inferential cognizer that was absolutely correct. I saw smoke, I inferred fire, and we acted on that. And that was a good thing because it burned up the whole entire land, all the trees. Inferential cognizers can be correct, but in Buddhism they can't, or in Buddhist philosophy they're not valid. They're correct but not valid. It doesn't sound right to our ears, but that's one of the things that we'll hear. There's also, so we have a direct perception, we have an inference, and that's a different kind of consciousness, awareness, cognizer. And then we can have what's called a subsequent cognizer, and this is where we would have memory. And this is where we would have reflexive awareness become part of the conversation. we can say it's something that's a correct assumption. I assumed that there was fire correctly through inference. So I saw the smoke, I inferred the fire. My correct assumption was that I needed to do something about that. And those are like subsequent. They're like one after the other. So all of these things become really important when we're looking at emptiness. I already talked about consciousness to which something appears but is not apprehended, or indeterminate perception. That was like if I am seeing something, but I'm actually paying attention to something else. I'm not actually apprehending it. It's like when you have the sense that somebody came in the room, but you didn't see them. That's consciousness to which something appears but is not apprehended. And then we can doubt something. I doubted that we could make it through the flames. That was a correct assumption. We turned around. If I had the mind that said, of course we can drive through those flames and get to the other side without being hurt, that would have been a wrong cognizer, a distorted cognition. It would have not taken into effect that the flames were already jumping the road. That would be a wrong cognition. It would be out of pride or some anger. Maybe I was having some anger at the moment and I was just like, angry with my husband and would be like, of course we're gonna go through the flames. That's a distorted cognition. It's not taking into account the actual reality in front of you. So I hope, in order to talk about ultimate mind, we could, just like when we talk about the self and the 5 different aggregates, we could find parts to the mind and examine whether or not there's any validity to the self that's attached to the 5 aggregates, or the mind as having parts or not having parts. But before we do that, I just realized I should ask you if you have any questions about the 7 types of awareness. Anybody want to chime in? I have to plug in, so I'm plugging in. No? Clear? Are the 7 types of awareness, are they conventional mind or ultimate mind? What do you think?
Say it again.
Conventional.
So Eloise said to say it again. Are the 7 types of awareness conventional or ultimate? And somebody
Well,
just said conventional and sounded very sure.
I think conventional. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, you should stay sure, Adrian. I liked it.
I
Good.
think
Why are they conventional? In what way are the 7 types of awareness conventional mind?
Because the mind is aware of it, because it's mutually dependent on obstructive space, or I think I didn't say that quite right, but
Usually on obstructed space.
yeah,
Is that what you said? That's an interesting reason.
I think I did. I think I actually said that.
So one of the things I think that has slipped out of my mouth was that because they're mutually dependent on each other, the 7 types of mind, or the direct perceivers, are the basis for the other types of mind indirectly. I think we went over that a little bit last time. And so in that way, that's conventional because they're relative, right? These types of mind are relative to each other. Direct perceivers are relative, are kind of the basis for, and therefore the others are relative to direct perception. I wouldn't have come to the conclusion that there was fire in San Cristobal if I hadn't seen the smoke rising above the valley. So I had to have the direct perception of smoke to have the inference of fire, and therefore have the correct assumption that the fire was dangerous and I should be out of any possible path that the fire might take. It actually came to where we were standing, but I didn't have a cognizer that could predict the future, right? I had doubt. I had a great deal of very good doubt that I should stay where I was, right? If I had stayed where I was, I would have had a wrong cognizer thinking that I could stay there and be safe. So all of that is dependent on the direct perception of smoke. So they are dependent, so they're relative. But what's the difference between being a conventional relative and being a mutually arising dependent origination, which is the ultimate mind? So I don't know, maybe I'm jumping too far, too fast. Anybody want to jump in and swim around a little bit with me? Or you want to keep going?
I'm hoping you can just tell us what the difference is.
Well, let's play around with it a little bit. So let's look a little bit more at the mind itself and see if we can understand a little bit from another perspective, which is its parts, right? We talk about mind and mental factors. So when we have those 4 aggregates that are all mental in nature, only one of them is consciousness, only one of them is mind. 3 of those, discrimination, feeling, and compositional factors, those 3 are mental factors. We've got the form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness, the 5 aggregates, the 5 parts of the self, the 5 parts that we are trying to determine how the self is kind of related to these 5 parts in order to understand emptiness. And we usually first understand emptiness of person, that myself can't be inherently existent because it has parts that it depends on. I, myself, me, this entity I call Rachel, who likes red and actually I have no favorite color, but you know, whatever I say I am and identify myself with being can be dissected into parts. Sarah, do you have a question?
No.
Could you mute so that we don't get an echo from you?
Sure.
And when
Sorry.
you do have a question, please unmute and join in. But if we have a self that is truly existent, it doesn't rely on anything else. That's the definition of true existence. It's independent. It's substantial. It's self-sufficient. Permanent. Permanent doesn't really cut it because there can be permanent things like space that are still dependent on other things and therefore, or have parts, like space has direction, sort of. If we have parts, we have to have dependence on parts. We have to have no true existence, no inherent existence. So again, we're flinging out all these terms, and there are levels and levels and levels and levels of them. The mind has that gross level of the sensory perception, and then it has the subtler levels of all of the subtle winds and the subtle mind and a very refined perception that you can finally get to the point where you can directly perceive emptiness, which is a non-inherent, is the non-inherent existence of things. It's a non-affirming negation, emptiness. If we really want to understand emptiness, we have to have the mind that understands it. We have to have that subtle mind able to understand that. So there are like layers of mind, there's layers of emptiness, and there's ways of talking about it that inspire us to investigate. One of my favorite things to think about when I'm thinking about emptiness, or I should say, one of the favorite stories that helps me sometimes think about emptiness is the fact that emptiness is like looking for your yak. I have a yak. I know I have a yak. I've inherited this yak. I know I have it. And it's supposed to be in this mountain valley, between this mountain and that mountain, in that mountain valley, and there's no way out of that mountain valley. There's no pass out of that mountain valley. All I have to do is search every inch of that mountain valley and find my yak. Right? You agree? If I have a yak and it's in that mountain valley and there's no way out of that mountain valley, all I have to do is look for it and I'll find it, right? Adriana, yes? I only see half your face, your ear. Is there any way that that couldn't be true? If I have a yak, say again?
If there's no way out of, if there's no pass out of the mountain, if the yak can't get in, then you can't get in. If the yak can't get out, then you can't get in to get the yak. You can't get in to
I
find
live
it.
there. I was born there. The yak's there. I inherited the yak.
Okay, so you're in the valley with you're up in the mountain with the yak. Okay. You're already there. Okay.
You're just giving me trouble. Is there any way that is there any
No, I was
way
trying
that
to-
I can't find the yak? If I'm in the valley, the yak's in the valley, and the yak can't escape the valley. Yes, Mary Jo.
Okay.
No, I think because the yak could move. The yak could be moving the same way that you're moving and you would never see the yak.
Oh, well, I'm thorough. If I'm thorough enough and I cover my tracks and I make sure that the yak can't be behind me if I've already gone through one part of the valley. If I'm really thorough, it's a narrow enough, it must be a narrow enough valley. It can't be a wide valley. I can see from one side to the other. And there's no obstruction. Is there any way that I should be able to find my yak, right? Are we good with that one? All right, so I should be able to find my yak in this valley if it exists. But I search and I'm very thorough and I pay attention and I don't lose my concentration. I don't fall asleep and I do it as quickly as I can so that I cannot have it move behind me somehow while I wasn't looking. I've been trained in searching for my yak all my life because I'm a yak herder. Right? This is what I do. I look for my yak. That's my job. I don't find it. I don't find it. If I don't find my yak, did it exist? It must not have existed. There's no way for it to have escaped. This is the setup of this story. It's not so that we twist the story now, right? The setup is if I've looked for it and it exists, but I don't find it, it must not exist. Is that correct? Okay, Sarah, why? Sarah, you're shaking your head.
Okay, I mean, it could still exist. You just didn't happen to cross paths with it. You missed each other.
Well, but remember I said I was going to be really thorough, that I'm a yak trainer. I mean, I've been trained to look for my yak. I don't let it get by me. It does take some skill. You're right. If I were unskillful, it could go behind me and I would think it's not there. Right? So it does depend on my skill. All right? But if it's true, if I have an army behind me that's making sure that the yak doesn't come behind me, right? And we don't find that yak, it must never have existed. It doesn't exist. My yak doesn't exist. So this is saying that myself doesn't exist. I've looked for myself in all the places it could be. So I need to set those parameters for myself. The 5 aggregates are what are setting those parameters. That's the valley. That's what I'm looking through. If I don't find myself in those 5 aggregates, it doesn't exist. All right. So now back to our mind and mental factors. If we were looking for the ultimate mind, we need to look into the mind itself and look for what really does exist. All right. Just like we did with the 5 aggregates looking for the true self. You can't say myself is my body because without my mind, I wouldn't be myself. You can't say that myself is my mind only because without my body, my feeling, my discrimination, and my other compositional factors, I wouldn't be myself. So you go through each thing, you look for the true self, that inherent selfness. And when you don't find it, that's emptiness. That's what emptiness is the lack of existence of the yak. It doesn't exist. It's empty of existence. And there are types of existence. And that's the refinement that we go through for those subtle things. But just in the general thing, when we're looking at mind and mental factors, we're talking about all the inner experience. And it's sort of like a jumble. Even when I'm breathing very consciously through my nose, it's all a jumble. What's the main mind? What are the mental factors that go along with that main mind that I'm paying attention to the breath with? So it's agreed. A moment of consciousness is a mind. Geez, all these words, they don't mean anything when we start to get into this, right? So a sangha, not a stanga. I think I was trying to do some yoga or something. A sangha compendium of knowledge. What is posited as the aggregate of consciousness? We're talking about that. 5 aggregates there. Whatever is mind and mentality, that too is consciousness. Okay, so we've got consciousness, mind, and mentality. These 3 are coming from Sanskrit. Right? We're going to talk about that in terms of mind and mental factors. Mental factors are facets of that mind. So a moment of consciousness is the mind. Whatever is posited as mind or mentality is also consciousness. Okay. Here are the synonyms, these 3 parts, these Sanskrit synonyms. Chitta, mind, manas, mentality, and vijnaya, consciousness. What did I say before? We were going to see 3 new words in Sanskrit that also meant mind, even though we already had 3, right? Now we're back to another 3, and they're totally different. Asanga said it is not correct, and this is a paraphrase because I didn't want to make it 3 pages long. Not correct to think these are synonyms with only the words being different, because we can see that they have different reference. All right, we've got 3 different reference. That means that mind means something slightly different than mentality, which means something slightly different than consciousness, but they're synonyms. They all mean generally mind. The mind is the 6 engaging consciousnesses. That's the 5 sense powers, sense consciousnesses, and the mental consciousness. That makes the 6 engaging consciousnesses within the continuum of a living being, which accumulate the latent potencies of experience, habits, and so on. An alternate definition of mind is the accumulation of latent potencies. Mentality is that which functions to cognize its object, sort of like that reflective quality that we were talking about, that which functions to cognize, but that's the awareness side of things, right? Functions to cognize, it's the awareness side. Consciousness is that which knows differentiated aspects of its object. So the mentality is the basis, and the consciousness is what is based on the basis. Oh yeah, Laura, I see that. That's okay. Yeah, so those are a lot of words. Backing up, what we're doing is we're looking at the mind and we're trying to find the parts of the mind so that we can see if it exists at all. Okay? By looking at all these words, we're trying to figure out what is the mind exactly, especially ultimately. So we're going through the conventional nature of the mind. This is still conventional parts of the mind, looking for a true existence of it. Well, even by looking at this, we've got people who have alternate definitions for each one of the words, and nobody seems to really know what they're talking about. I say that lightheartedly because people who have been writing about this in these traditional texts spent their entire lives engaged in the mind, right? We're talking about people who meditated and investigated through experience, not just through words. And so they knew a lot more than I know about the mind. But when we translate it, it becomes very superficial again, and we're stuck with that right now. All right, so my spell check did something really strange with Chittamatra, which is the mind only school. So here's again this problem that I'm having with presenting this to you and not having enough time to prepare, and I apologize. But there's an incredibly vast richness of material that leads an individual person from one paradigm into another with regard to emptiness, right? We know, and we'll come back to this a little bit, we know, sorry, there are 4 major systems that are the tenet systems, the Vaibhashika, and I didn't spell these correctly, I just did them phonetically. Vaibhashika, Swatantrika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika. And the first 2 are what are considered Hinayana. They're not even Mahayana Buddhist. They are looking at just liberation, not omniscience, as the end goal of Buddhahood. And they're, in terms of their understanding of emptiness, it's more simplistic, right? So these paradigms build on themselves to the point where we can start looking at Madhyamika, middle way. Madhyamika means middle way, right? Where we can start seeing like the ideas of Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Lama Tsongkhapa, interpreting what the Buddha said in a way that leads our mind into this refined understanding of emptiness. But each one of these 4 tenet systems speaks about it differently. And unless we're really clear about all of it, none of it's clear. And we just throw out words and think we know what we're talking about, and the context gets all messed up. I'm saying that because that's exactly where I'm at, right? I've been listening to this stuff for decades, and I can't spout it back to you in 20 minutes or less, right? But these are the paradigms that lead us into the more and more subtle understandings of emptiness. So the mind only school is the first Mahayana tenet system, and then the third one in this list, second to last. So if you get to that, if you have like an actual paradigm in your mind and that's how you experience reality, that's Chittamatra, congratulations, you have made an incredible step. You're actually in the Mahayana system. And once you're in the Mahayana system, you know what happens, right? Do you know what happens once you're in the Mahayana system? Sarah says no. Anybody know? Stella, you know, right? What happens to your mind once you've entered the Mahayana system, the Mahayana path? What's going to happen for sure if you've entered the Mahayana path? You've got yourself muted. Do you know how to unmute? There
You
you are.
achieve bodhicitta.
Bodhicitta is it. And when you achieve what bodhicitta is intending, we've got a Buddha, right? So once you've entered the Mahayana path, it is certain you are going to become a Buddha. Congratulations. If you've gotten to the paradigm that sees reality as mind only, you're there. But that doesn't mean we can fool ourselves and say we're there when we're not, right? But it does mean that, you know, all of this effort that we're making, all of this confusion we're going through, all of the studies that we do, they build on themselves to the point where we have the definite result available to us, right? So Chittamatras are saying, now to go back to where we were, sorry for the, Chittamatras are saying that they assert the notion of a foundation consciousness. Foundation consciousness, Sanskrit synonyms have different reference. So in the Chittamatra school, Chitta means mind, just like bodhicitta, chitta. Matra means only, so mind only. That's the translation of that word. They assert that mentality, mind, and consciousness have different reference. They are referring to different things. Mind is the foundation consciousness that is the basis for the seeds of action. Mentality is the afflictive mental consciousness that grasps the foundation consciousness as me. And consciousness, the 6 engaging consciousnesses that cognize their respective objects, that which apprehends objects. So you can see here that those 3 parts of the mind perform different functions. So they're not exactly the same as each other. But together they make up the mind, sort of like the self makes up, the 5 aggregates make up the self. So what's the difference between a mind and a mental factor? Because those 3 things are talking about just the mind. And now we've got the mental factors in the 5 aggregates as well. So distinguishing the middle from the extremes. This is a sutra that says, that which sees the object is consciousness. What sees its attributes, the mental factors. So there are 2 ways to interpret what the it means in this verse. And it can be talking about how mental factors are attributes of the main mind, or attributes of the main mind's functions, cognizing also the specific attributes of the object as well. So this is a lot of detail, but it shows that there's 2 things happening in when we are seeing or hearing an object. We're seeing the phone. The mind has a main mind, and it has these accompanying minds, mental factors. such as feeling, discrimination, attention, faith, and so on. There's these kinds of directive factors. If we didn't have attention on the object, the mind wouldn't be able to actually cognize the object. If we didn't have the feeling, the experiential factor, we wouldn't really experience or cognize the object. If we didn't discriminate the object and distinguish it from other objects, if everything was blurry, we wouldn't have a main mind that comprehended its or apprehended or cognized its object. So we've got a main mind that cognizes, but we've got these other factors that direct it. And I'm not going to go into all of this. You guys can read all of what I've wrote, or you can read the book that I wrote it from. But it's, I'm trying to find, yeah, here's the list. At the end here, it says similar to all the remaining mental factors, such as, so we've got feeling, discrimination, intention, contact, faith, and attention. All of these are not they're not to be understood in the manner of a king surrounded by an entourage of many different ministers. So if we have the main mind, and he was the king, or she was the queen, and there were all the ministers around, that's not what the mind and the mental factors looks like. There's only one consciousness at a time. There's only one main mind, one consciousness, but it has certain qualities that go along with it. And those qualities are called mental factors, and they direct the quality of the experience that the mind itself is clear and knowing, clear and aware. The mental factors have different qualities that go along. Some of them are negative. Some of them are positive. Some of them are neutral. Some of them are omnipresent. There's all kinds of types. When you study the types of mind, the low rig, right? You get 51 mental factors, but that's only a sampling. There are a lot of mental factors. They're condensed down into a list of 51. And they include feeling, discrimination, attention, intention, faith, and so on. All right. Is it a slightly bit clearer, or have I muddled it all? Sarah, I can't tell. Your hand went up as if it was completely a muddle and I've made a mess of it. So let me know if I have, and let me see if I can answer a question and make it less so. Anybody? What do you think? Mary Jo, what do you think? No? Her finger looks like she's searching for the yak that is the mute button, the unmutable yak. I recognize that gesture. I want to find the mute button and I'm not. There you are.
I was trying to see the words that were beneath your picture. So I don't have anything to say that's worth
Okay.
mentioning.
we've done kind of I feel like I've done a sloppy job of trying to get to this idea of the conventional mind, with the mind and mental factors kind of together. The mind itself having three parts: this mentality, mind, and consciousness, and the mental factors directing that. And that if we were to understand all of those parts, and we were to look at it as we did the self and the five aggregates, just as we did of the yak in the valley, and we didn't find any true existence, if we don't find anything that exists independently of all the other parts, we have an ultimate mind. So in effect, back to what Adriana was saying, where she was so convinced that it was the conventional mind, if we have a mind, it has to also have an ultimate nature. To exist at all, to function, to change, to be able to interact with other things, it has to have an empty nature. It has to be empty of inherent existence. Which means on the surface that mind have nothing but covering over the ultimate mind. They're like obstructive view over the ultimate nature of the mind. Now, somebody might be saying to me, Rachel, you don't have any more time. I don't actually know, because all of my screens are they're covering over the time telling things that I have. So if somebody notices that I have like 5 minutes left, or I've already gone over, please tell me, because I'm kind of blind right now. I've got that conventional blindness. In my presentation, there's some extra things. You can maybe listen to Venerable Sangye Kadra's presentation on perception versus conception. You know how when we have a direct perceiver, it's non-conceptual. And a conceptual consciousness is taking a universal as its object, as its observed object. An unmistaken, awesome. I look at that. I had the premonition that it was 7:25. I've seen the ultimate nature of time. Thank you, John. Unmistaken non-conceptual consciousness, which has a unique particular as its observed object, and a mistaken non-conceptual consciousness, which has a clear appearance of a non-existent as its observed object. Anyway, there's all these other things we could say about the mind. And I just want to point out a couple of things before we're done. Ultimate has a few ways of being thought about, just like conventional had the worldly, the relative, and the covering natures of conventional. Ultimate, if you were to read through something like The Essence of Eloquence and all these really heavy tomes, you might find that there are some aspects to ultimate, such as final, or after analysis, or true meaning. And so again, we could dissect the word ultimate a little bit and see how, upon searching for the true essence of the mind, which we know by definition is clear and aware, looking at that mind finally to find the end of that, or after analysis, tearing it apart, looking at all the parts and its relationship to them, or the trueness of the meaning. We could sort of dissect the word ultimate, but ultimate mind, in my mind, needs a function. It needs a purpose. Okay, so ultimately, the mind doesn't exist as it appears to be independent, without parts, acting on its own volition. I mean, the mental factors have to come along and sort of make things happen in terms of experience. The consciousness itself doesn't do anything. It's just aware. The mental factors direct it. So the ultimate nature of the mind as its definition of clear, reflective awareness, has a purpose. And back to our motivation when we had bodhicitta, the vastness and the profound, the ultimate nature, as our goal for our exploration tonight. Oh, I'm going backwards. No wonder it didn't make any sense to me. I was like, what am I doing? We could go into all the details that would hopefully help us refine that understanding through the four major tenet systems, Vaibhashika, Sautantrika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka, coming eventually to really what Stella mentioned is bodhicitta, right? In order to have true ultimate bodhicitta, we actually have to understand the ultimate nature of reality, that we can't find a self because it doesn't exist. Not because our minds are not good enough to find it, but because it didn't ever exist in the first place. I thought I inherited that yak, but in essence, it never really existed the way it appeared to my mind. Bodhicitta, built on that understanding of emptiness, that it doesn't exist, that things don't exist as they appear, leads us to the mind of awakening. It is the training of our mind that brings us to true Buddhahood, liberation from all suffering, and the ability to assist others to become liberated and become Buddhas themselves. Without the understanding of the ultimate nature, which is the ultimate nature of mind, the ultimate nature of the self, the ultimate nature of phenomena, without that ultimate nature, understanding of ultimate nature, bodhicitta is just conventional, just like our understanding of the mind is just conventional until we can find the lack of inherent existence of it. Ultimate bodhicitta mind is the key to the paths, the 10 bhumis, the path of seeing and all the paths to enlightenment from that point on. Like a subsequent cognizer, once we have directly perceived suchness, once we have that direct perception. Now, this isn't just an intellectual understanding of what it means to be inherently non-exist, or to be lacking inherent existence, is this thing called a direct yogic perceiver. So like a direct perception of our 6 sense consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses plus the mental sense consciousness, those are not yogic direct perceivers or direct yogic perceivers. Those are direct perceivers, but they're not direct yogic perceivers. A direct yogic perceiver perceives something like this emptiness directly. Through analysis, we get there first intellectually, and then through familiarity, we develop the direct yogic perception that sees emptiness without any inference. Once you've got there, you're an Arya being. You're but you're not yet a bodhisattva. You just have the wisdom aspect. And a mind that's imbued with that wisdom develops then ultimate bodhicitta, like a subsequent cognizer, right? So first you have to have the mind that's so absorbed with emptiness, with suchness, and then bring in spontaneous bodhicitta. And now you're on your way. You're on the path of seeing. You've entered the first bhumi, and now it's just clear sailing all the way to Buddhahood. You practice the perfections, and that the most subtle, clear light mind becomes enlightened. That's what we're training to do. Enlightenment holds the two truths. Up until enlightenment, we alternate in practice between conventional and ultimate realities. Sometimes we get glimpses of ultimate reality. Other times we get correct cognizers of conventional reality. And we practice with our ultimate reality and our bodhicitta until awakening completely and knowing ultimate reality directly. Then when we're Buddhas, we only see conventional reality through the minds of sentient beings, ordinary beings, who we know because we're so focused on everything, we're omniscient, because we're so focused on ultimate reality that we have the ability to be omniscient as a Buddha. All right. What does this mean? Let's train our mind, understand karma in the mind, happiness, freedom from suffering, enlightenment, study Lamrim, train our mind with Lojong, and practice, do the practices of a bodhisattva. The end. Questions before we go?
No questions. That was just fabulous, Rachel. That was really fun. Thank you.
It's fun. Thank you.
Fun! I love it. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say that a Dharma teaching was fun. Have you?
Oh, it's the mind thing. Yeah, it's just like, it's like jumping rope. It's just fun. It's, just the getting all the brain cells rolling around together. It's I find it really fun.
I don't understand it all, but it's still fun.
Okay, good. Excellent.
It gets you
Adriana-
going where you want to understand it.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. It was enough. I was able to glean enough, points throughout that I want to understand it, that I want to know more, that I want to, reflect on it and meditate on it.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, we should have fun when we're studying Dharma.
Yeah.
And it's not true that I've never heard it before. But I was gonna say, if you have that mind that says, that was fun, but I didn't really understand it, that's very much like what happens when you go to a teaching in Tibetan with all the Tibetans. Half the time, they don't worry that they're not understanding. We have infinite lifetimes ahead of us to understand all of this. And these seeds are being planted. And so just by having fun and putting your mind onto these ideas and paying attention and listening and thinking and enjoying. So wonderful, because all those seeds actually lead to the realizations that we're talking about. That's the point of all of this. That's our dedication, that the vastness of our intention and the profoundness of our understanding increase more and more. And that which has not arisen as understanding of emptiness and suchness, that which has not arisen as bodhicitta arise and grow, take root in our heart and develop the fruit of not only wisdom and compassion, but the fruit of Buddhahood, right? That's our goals. So, John, do us the honors. Oh, I might turn sideways here, guys, so that I can. Oh, it won't turn with me. Okay, tiny little print, just like my friend Mary Jo. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception, seen, unseen, known, or unknown, into that enlightened state. Free of suffering, totally free of suffering. No more suffering for anyone. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen know no decline, not diminish, but increase more and more. I wouldn't have been able to do what I just did without the teachings of the Dalai Lama. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has made all of this possible on so many levels. Right? Personally in my life, impersonally in the world. So with that in mind, this wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Similarly, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Kyabche Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And of course, Lama Yeshe and Lama Osel. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request, O Lama, please, please live long. All right, ladies and gentlemen. If you had any question and you wanted to say, you're welcome.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Rachel,
It's so wonderful to
Good night,
Um,
Rick.
let us hear from you from time to time while you're away.
okay.
Send an
All
email
right.
every once in a while to say, how it's going.
You ask me and I'll respond.
Okay, all right, all right,
Anytime you're curious, don't hesitate. Just go ahead and write
all right,
and ask.
all right.
Because I might forget, because